All right, hello everybody. My name is Zour. I'm the program manager for this group research project. And in my group, I have my colleagues Blanca, Natalie, and Z. And tonight we're going to be discussing about community college success for Latinos. And so when we first began this research, we came across this problem, which is that there are too few Latino male students transferring over to four-year institutions within a four-year time frame. And a notion or a sentence that helps to support that notion is that in 2021, about 78% of Latinx students enrolled in California community colleges. However, only 14% of Latino male students transferred within 4 years. And so with that being said, we really want to figure out why Latino male students might be prolonging their ability to transfer. And so before I carry on, I do want to introduce our client and panel members for tonight. Our client is Kevin Cook. He's the Associate Center Director of Public Policy Institute of California, also known as PPIC. Next, for our panel members, we have Elizabeth Delgado. She's a Program Specialist for Foundation for California Community Colleges. Next, we have Anna Alvarado. She is the Director of California Edge Coalition. Lastly, I do want to thank our stakeholders, even though they cannot be here tonight. First, we have Catherine Blanco Martinez. She's the Director of External Affairs and Strategic Planning of the Puente Project. Next, we have Jose Gonzalez. He is the Director of Mikasa over at Consumnes River Community College. Lastly, we have Suchin Jez. She is the CEO of California Competes. And I just want to throw a big shout out that Kevin Cook and some of our panel members and some of our stakeholders are former PPA students. So stingers up. All right. Oh, and before I carry on, I will say I will be interchangeably using the terms Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, depending on the terminology that was used in the resources that I gathered from. But I would definitely make a clear distinction of Latino male students. And also, that's just to say I'm referring to somebody of Latin descent. So back to this. About 40% of California's demographic is Latinx, which is its most populous demographic. And 77% are US born, and 33% are born outside of the US. And so in California, 49% of our immigrants are Latin born. So with that being said, we have individuals that are those who are born outside of the US or considered Latin born. There's cultural differences already. And the immigrants who happen to have children in the US, their children considered first generation. So that's kind of a unique experience. And lastly, we do have to consider that if they come from a different country, their first language might not be English. So then there's language barriers. With all that being said, they have to navigate these in public spaces while living in the US. And regarding public spaces, I'm referring to possibly work, maybe school. And on the topic of school, about 87% of Latinx earn a high school degree, which is a 73% increase from 10 years ago. But the reality is that most high schools serving the Latinx student do not prepare them for college. And about half of Latinx adults do not possess a bachelor's degree. And our current college systems are not updated to give fair access to people once marginalized and discriminated. And this is beyond the first generation student. I'm also talking about the fourth, third, or second generation student. And so currently we have about 9 out of 10 Latinx undergraduates that attend public colleges. And so I just want to say that with all that in mind, we have more individuals from the Latinx demographic, not just finishing a high school, but they're also striving to earn a bachelor's degree or a higher education degree. And yet our systems in place are just not updated for them. And so why is it that the Latino male student might be prolonging their ability to transfer? And so first, I already mentioned language barriers, cultural barriers, and how sometimes they're not prepared for college, but gender expectations. Specifically for Latino male students, there are cultural pressures and gender pressures for them to display a masculinity, but also perhaps at an early age, maybe by the time they're 15, they're also expected to help support their family financially, get a job. And so that balancing those cultural expectations and gender expectations, balancing that with school can a lot of pressure for them. And lastly, I want to mention economic barriers and generational impacts, and I want to mention them coincide together. And the reason for that is because Going back to referring the fourth, third, second generation, perhaps their parents or grandparents might not have been given equal opportunities to higher education or be able to get jobs. And so therefore, it leads to that generational impact of economic mobility, a limited economic mobility. And so with any combination of these factors, these leads to gaps for Latino male students regarding to their ability to transfer over to four-year colleges and beyond that, college success. And so on the right here, I have a figure, and on the left, it's the Latinx demographics for those born outside the US. And on the right bar is Latinx demographics born in the US. And so I more so just want to point out about the percentages for a bachelor's degree or associate's degree. It's pretty small, or if you can't read the numbers, it's the red and blue bars versus to the green and the brown bars which is high school diplomas or no high school diplomas. And we hope that with all that's being presented today or during the intro, that we create alternatives that help to increase those numbers for bachelor's degree. And so here I have a problem tree. And on the bottom of the problem tree, I already mentioned some of these factors as to what causes a Latino male student not being able to transfer within a time frame. I already mentioned English learner, first generation. I do want to point out, and I didn't mention this yet, about parents that do not possess a college degree or possibly a high school diploma. And what that means is sometimes those parents, if they don't have the information to be able to go to college or be prepared for college, they aren't able to prepare their children. And so I already mentioned how schools sometimes do not prepare their students either, specifically for the Latinx student. And so what that means is that you have these students entering the college systems where their parents weren't able to prepare them. And then you also have these students where at the K through 12 systems, we're not able to prepare them either. And so here's the top of the problem tree, which are possible consequences or impacts if our problem continues to exist. For instance, I have joint labor workforce. Sometimes we have students that need to sometimes we have students that need to be able to afford their cost of living. And that means getting a job that might not have a lot of job qualifications, something that's easy to enter. But the reality is that when they have to balance with work and school, that adds a lot of stressors, especially when trying to adjust or adapt into the college systems. And so if they're able to work and go to school, it just possibly might prolong their ability to transfer. But what that means that you have these jobs that might not be filled quickly enough. And the unfortunate reality is that sometimes students, they do prefer to prioritize their ability to afford the cost of living, especially consider that the cost of living is increasing. But that leads to them being limited for job opportunities. But beyond that, if that student chooses not to go back to college, it leads them to getting stuck in this generational cycle of limited economic mobility. And what does that mean? When they have children of their own, start their own family, their children might rely on financial aid when their children enters the college system. And that leads to increased demands of financial aid, support programs for Latino students. But beyond that as well, you also have these new families that would have to rely on the government for other programs, such as safety net programs. And with that being said, it leads to this government pressure of having to possibly reform higher education if we're just talking about the college community level. And so why attempt to solve this issue? I think I already mentioned this already, but once again, the Latinx demographic is the most populous demographic. And we need that demographic to be able to ensure the economic future for California, not just to ensure that it's stabilized, but to ensure that it's thriving. And why a college degree? So most Latinx students, they enroll at community colleges because it's closer to home, and it goes back into the cultural expectations. They need to be able to help out the family if able to. And if we're able to help them to transfer over to a four-year institution, they're able to earn a four-year degree or a bachelor's degree, that in a bachelor's degree imply higher annual earnings, higher salary. Someone with a bachelor's degree earn about 62% more than someone with only a high school degree. And benefits extend beyond the wage gains. We're talking about, for California specifically, lower unemployment rate. We also have better retirement, better benefits such as better healthcare. And essentially, you have these programs that are being funded by their jobs. And essentially, these individuals don't need to rely on the state to be able to support them. And this would help to gap the larger inequities between Latinx demographics and their counterpart. So since this is a statewide issue in California, we'll need state intervention. And all that being said, we came up with 3 alternatives to address this problem. The first one being mentorship program, and that it's to address the cultural barriers for Latino male students. It's to also help them give guidance, help them in case they aren't prepared for college. Next, we have workforce program, which is to address the community as a whole to help give them professional paid work experience. And by the time they exit the college system, they're able to become desirable job candidates. Lastly, we have second-year intensive program. It's to really address our more vulnerable specific groups for Latino male students, those who have yet, or those who aren't able to adjust in the college system, or possibly those who are not doing so well with their grades that they might be on the verge of dropping out. Lastly, we want to be able to ensure that they do transfer out to 4-year institutions as well. And so how we decided to choose the best alternative was to utilize the criterion matrix analysis, or alternative matrix, yes, also known as CAM. We chose 3 weighted criterions, the first one being efficiency, also known as cost efficiency, which means it's utilizing the funds for maximal input. Next, we have equity at 50%, which is to ensure highest number of transfer rates, but also we would love to be able to see highest amount of bachelor's degree or higher education, or also more higher paying jobs for Latinx groups. Lastly, we have administratability for 20%, and it's just basically that if this alternative is implemented, it is the easiest to oversee. And here I have the CAM qualitative analysis. I won't go too much into details with this, but a general idea is that on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being that this alternative does not address any of the barriers for Latino students, versus to a 5 being that this alternative helps to address, if not most, all barriers for Latino male students. And lastly, this is a CAM quantitative analysis. And right now I have the numbers, the rates, the scores blank, and my colleagues who are presenting the alternative tonight will be breaking down the numbers and interpreting what those mean. Any questions? All right, I'll be passing it over to my colleague, Blanca.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Blanca Zarate. Let me move this over. So thank you, Zour, for that wonderful introduction to our policy problem that too few Latino males are transferring from the community college system to the 4-year universities. And when exploring this problem, I came across my alternative, which is mentorship programs in community colleges. So very briefly, my alternative, I'll go over my alternative and what that entails, and also provide why this alternative is important for first-generation Latino males in particular, and what are the expected outcomes, of course, when we implement this alternative. So this was my stakeholder, Catherine Blanca Martinez, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today. She's the Director of External Affairs and Strategic Planning at UC Berkeley for the Puente Project. She has 30 years of experience working within the community college system and working with Latino students as well. So she was very helpful in providing some of the data you will see here today. So mentorship programs, what are mentorship programs at the community college level? So mentorship programs have the potential to provide students with the consistent support and guidance necessary to successfully navigate the community college system. And they do this by providing intentional support, and that goes into first identifying what the specific needs are for each student. And really tailoring the resources specifically to these needs. With your mentor, you can work on a course plan for transferring. So as Zour mentioned, oftentimes we have Latino males that are first in their families to enter the community college system. And that goes into they often start off taking courses that they don't necessarily need to achieve their academic goals. So having a mentor that can work with you in what your plan is for transferring can help you ensure that you'll transfer at an adequate rate. And then they assist with career readiness as well. So when you have a mentor that has gone through a mentorship program, like the one I will be discussing here shortly, and they're able to share those same skills that they've learned out in their communities or learned out in their workplace. They are able to share those same skills with the mentee that they're helping navigate the community college system. And what I really like the most about mentorship programs is helps increase persistence. And I say this because when we have first generation students entering college and they're faced with barriers that not all students of different origins face, and having to overcome these barriers, right, without having the support from family because they're unable to help you through these problems or helping you identify the resources that you need. So I think that sometimes that also pushes some of these students to become discouraged from continuing their education. So when you have somebody that's already gone through the community college system, have achieved a degree, and can show you and keep you motivated, I think that's very important and helpful for these students in particular. So why this alternative? And I will share a very personal part of my background as well. I was a first generation college student. I went to community college, and I really also faced a lot of the same barriers that Latino first generation students face, coming from English as a second language, lower income household, and just being the first in my family. So now that I look back into that part of my early years in college, I think that having had someone that wasn't first and could have helped me would have been very helpful. So a program that's been around for quite some time, at least 40 years, and is currently implementing a lot of what I've just recently discussed is the Puente program. And the Puente program project is a nationally award-winning program that has improved the college going rate of over 300,000 Californians from the time it's first began in 1981 in Hayward. It's currently present in 75 campuses, and recently it's actually being implemented in 2 states in the Southwest. And on a yearly basis, it serves 9,500 students, and it implements a curriculum of English writing, counseling, and mentorship focus. So when the program first began in 1981, the 2 counselors that were at Shabbat College in Hayward really wanted to understand why the majority of their Latino students were dropping out. And they took 2,000 applications from Mexican American Latino students and found a common trend that the majority of the students dropping out were first in their family. They were not enrolled in English level writing courses, and they were not seeking the counseling courses that they needed, or counselors needed to guide them or help them understand their academic plan. So the Puente Project achieves their goal is to achieve a higher transfer rate among this group of Latino students, even though it's open to all from students from all backgrounds. And they really do focus on these three factors, but while helping them transfer, it's also a way for them to build the next generation of community leaders and those next generation of mentors that will then come back to serve as Puente mentors. So here's some of the data. I didn't mention earlier that not only do like 9 out of 10 community college Puentistas are first generation in their family, they are also 90% of them do identify as low income. So these are some of the barriers that they're faced with. And one of the figures here on the right-hand side shows that Puente students have a higher retention and persistence rate in comparisons to all CC students statewide. And actually, another important fact is that two nationally recognized organizations, one being the Excelencia in Education is a Hispanic organization in DC, and the Campaign for Community College Opportunity have both endorsed having more mentorship programs on campuses to help with the transfer rate of Latino students. And then, like I said, it's open to everyone, but 91% of Puentistas self-identify as Latino or Chicano. So the design elements of the Puente project include English writing, counseling, and academic planning. And the design choice is the community mentorship. But the Puente project does have a saying that says, once a Puentista, always a Puentista. And I think that's like building a sense of community amongst each other, right? So when you build that sense of community, that will increase your chances or your want and need to come back into the community. So it's empowering dreams and cultivating leaders as the secret sauce. So why should government continue funding the Puente project? And so funding comes from some money comes from the UC system. Other parts of it comes from the California Community College Chancellor's Office. And it has some private funding, like you can still donate to this program, or some other donors, potential mentors can also help fund this program for students. So we have an achievement gap still within the Latino community in comparison to their other students of other races. So for California to maintain its standing as the 5th largest economy in the world, it has to produce at least 1.65 million college graduates by 2030, and it can't do that without the educational success of Latinos as the largest growing population in the state. So of course, that creates negative externalities for the rest of the state. If we have such a large population, we can't ignore the problem. So as Zour mentioned earlier, what does that do if we have less Latinos going to college and then they have their families? So it's that consistent immobility to grow in careers, the workforce. So it creates equity concerns. And although Latinos are attending college at higher rates than before, only 18% of Latino adults have a degree, and that's lower than any other racial group in our state. So here's my logic model. And of course, when we take the Puente project, community mentors, community college counselors, and the activity is provides mentorship and academic guidance for first-generation Latino male students to achieve career and academic goals. our outputs are increasing the number of transfer students to four-year universities and creating the next generation of community leaders and mentors. So when I was meeting with my stakeholder and we discussed some of the barriers that the Puente Project may face in actually achieving this goal on campus, she mentioned that some campuses don't often promote the program to its full extent. So that creates issues for those students that could benefit from the program, aren't actually getting the help that they need if the faculty or the program itself isn't as strong as it should be or it can be. And then she also mentioned that it's difficult to sometimes pairing students with mentors in more underserved communities or rural communities. So she mentioned that during COVID, it was, of course, no, they couldn't meet, and it wasn't always like if students didn't have the adequate access to meeting online with their mentors, that kind of damaged somewhat the relationship that they could have built with their mentors. And of course, the outcomes are increasing the number of first-generation Latino males, and the impacts for our state is a stronger state economy, narrowing the achievement gap, which is what we would love to see, and increasing the number of Latinos in all of these diverse workforces. And of course, mediating factors as well can be family expectations or demands that prevent students from continuing their education or working students. So are outside of the factor, outside of the studio factors, sorry. So here's my qualitative CAM. And as you can see, it's the most cost efficient. Well, it ranks 4 on cost efficiency, and because the policy is resource efficient, achieving substantial improvement in Latino male success rate. So the Puente Project has a 47% transfer rate. So it does have a high number in comparison to other students, as I previously mentioned. And equity, the policy significantly reduces barriers or disparity for Latino males, but it also helps the other students that aren't necessarily from the Latino backgrounds, so the underserved communities. But the administrability of the Puente Project rings out of 5. And this is because it's been around for such a long time, and it continues to grow among college campuses and, like I mentioned, in other states. So when a campus would love to have the Puente Project, they can contact the UC Berkeley headquarters, where their faculty will receive training in the curriculum. So they help with the smooth transition and implementation of the project on their campus. And an overall quantitative score of 4.2. It doubles the amount of transfer rates with the least amount of cost. Highest number of transfer rates within the 1 to 5 years of low income English as a second language and first generation students. And of course, the high administrability. I hope I don't have to say that again. So the results, right? What does this program do well? And so Latinos comprise for 43% of all undergraduate students attending community colleges and public universities in the state, making them the largest single racial and ethnic group in California. So what does this alternative do well? It does have a high retention rate, high transfer rate. And so it does help achieve its goal in transferring students from first generation students and other ethnic backgrounds. But what can it do? What can this alternative do differently? And so as I was doing my research on the Puente Project, I actually came across a very interesting study that said that what the Puente Project can also do is have a focus on math, right? So we know that when we enter community colleges, and you have to take those, for those that have gone through the community college system, having to take your English and your math courses as well. And sometimes, if you aren't college ready and you're having this expectation to get to a certain level of math, right? that can also be a barrier because it's more English focused, English writing as well. So um, I actually also read that that the Puente Project is starting a pilot program among 5 campuses, and it's more STEM focused to also help increase the for Latinos in the STEM field, which is something new and exciting. That way not only is it increasing the transfer rate, but increasing the presence of Latinos in mainly underserved or not as much of a represented field that we have. Any questions? Yes, I. Mm-hmm. So my understanding that the Puente project had a GPA requirement and it doesn't. So it really is more on how your campus actually reaches out or like advertises your program, advertises the program, and it does have like a counselor intake that will go with you through what are the requirements for you to be in the Puente project. You have to sign a contract that you are committed. So you have to show commitment to the program, and it's not there aren't any other like you have to be one of the have the 4.0 GPA to go in, or you have to have all of these extracurricular activities aren't necessarily taken into account. It's more so, what is your goal? What is your background? And how can we help you achieve this? If that helps. Yes, Rob. Yes. No, so actually I asked Kathy that and she said no. She said, well, you have to at least attend they have where they have like parents come into the campus or like and then they have other activities that you have to show up to. But she said even if you do if you are for whatever reason dropping out of the program, you can always come back. So you do have an expectation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like we're going to kick you out of the program. They have that instance. She said that counselors will meet with you and ask what's going on. Are you no longer interested? How can we help you? So kicking someone out or telling them they can no longer be in the program isn't actually part of what they do. Any other questions? Oh, Christy. 1.65 million graduates by 2030. Cost. So it was a report released by the California Campaign for College Opportunity. And that's a foundation that's focused on the transfer rate, but college access to community college access for underserved communities. Yeah. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Sure. Oh. It's a good question. I have to go back and check where we actually came up with this one, but I can provide it for you and double check this. Well, yeah, so it because it has like a 47% transfer rate for those entering. Um, I do have to look it up for you, but it was like 18% for those that don't go through the program. So, yeah. So I'll have to. My tabs should be open. Mhm. But I do have something that says that about the 18%. So Oh, thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Zoma, and tonight I'll be presenting my alternative, which is develop a county community program that develops workforce programs for community college students. My alternative is Sujin Jez. She is the CEO of California Competes. And a little fun fact about her, she used to be a professor at this very program. So, a little background on first California Competes and then this alternative as to why I chose it. California Competes is a nonpartisan policy and research advocacy group that focuses on higher education. And they mainly focus on the intersectionality of higher education, student success, and economic support for that student. So it was really a amazing opportunity to contact Sujin and have her be my alternative, my stakeholder for this alternative. My background as to why I chose this. Latinos are overrepresented in low wage jobs. Coincidentally, they earn less than the state median wage. So we see that they are on this chart right here. The top occupations, these are low wage jobs. In a survey in 2020, 10% of recent graduates were Latino. Of that 10%, 12% of them did not do an internship, and 10% of them did an unpaid internship. So again, we're seeing an overrepresentation of Latinos being underserved at the community, at the college level. So why should government get involved? Well, first is economic development. When you pay for training and skill professional training for the future workforce development, you get that back once they graduate. Workforce development decreases unemployment and also underemployment. This is not a phrase that my colleagues will talk about, but underemployment is also the lack of representation and diversity in hiring. So we see a lot of industries seeing a lack of diversity in their job applications, and economic development can improve the pool of applicants that industries will see. Another reason why government should get involved is social equity. So again, Latinos are underserved, underrepresented in predominantly STEM jobs, these high-paying jobs, and government needs to fill in that equity issue that's happening. Why are Latino men specifically being underrepresented in high-paid and also STEM jobs? And finally, maximizing public resources. When you invest money in the future workforce, that will just go back into the community. It's just common knowledge. But it's also this understanding that once you fund and once you help pay a student up, they will come back and they will replenish that community that they're in. So to answer the policy question that my project managers were presented, workforce development enhances skills and employment outcomes, thereby increasing the transfer rate among Latino community college students. Not only does workforce development help a student get career ready, but it also helps them pick a better degree in a traditional four-year institution. A lot of community college students may face a difficulty in trying to pick a degree once they exit out of community colleges. And workforce development programs can help them better assess what careers they might need for their immediate community and what the community needs them to have. So let's use a real life example to paint this picture. California Competes is a facilitator for this really long title of pilot project. The Los Angeles County 2nd District California Community College Career Ready Pilot, or LA2CCC. It was established in 2022. It's a 2-year pilot, so it's going to end this year. And they were provided a $500,000 grant by the ECMC Foundation. ECMC Foundation is another institution that focuses on higher education. And when talking to Sujin, she explained to me that this pilot isn't about data, the hard data. It's more about establishing a partnership, a working relationship between the counties, the Los Angeles, the Los Angeles County District, and the community colleges itself. So this is a pilot program to establish and share resources and expertise from all 3 of these major titans that would boost and build a student's outcome. They're all stakeholders in this process, but the biggest stakeholder is the student's needs. So they are working in tangent with California Competes to identify what a student needs and also what the industry partners need and what community colleges are capable of having, and also the county's funding. So when they first began this pilot, they wanted to establish principles that would be universal for all the community colleges that were involved. And I want to preface that if you don't know the LA 2nd District, this is not a wealthy district for LA. This is Compton College, this is El Camino College, this is Southwest Los Angeles Community College. So these are very underserved parts of Los Angeles. This is in Beverly Hills. So they wanted to make sure that the practices in each community colleges were universal for all students, meaning that they all will get the same outcome regardless of what community college that they went to. So because of that, they developed 6 practices. Communicating with students early and often about career readiness. You have to instill and you have to be almost that pestering voice in their head to let them know that their career is right around the corner. Engaging in faculty in career readiness. The community college faculty are going to be at the forefront. They're going to be interacting the most with the students. And so having them fully equipped, fully prepared, being sort of like their liaison to the process is really important. Strengthening employee partnerships, promoting paid experiences for students. It's kind of twofold. We want to make sure they get paid, and we also want to make sure that the employers have the necessary needs for the students and making sure that they're prepared for these internships. And then finally, improving connections between the county and the colleges and collaborating across colleges to better meet the needs of the residents. The county has a lot of leverage, and by building that relationship with the county, they not only have the support, but they also have the expertise. And that was really important that they were at the table with everyone else. And also the residents' needs is just making sure that we're providing adequate experiences for them that would transfer over once they graduate. So let's talk about some design elements of LA2CCC. First is the practice reforms. They wanted to make sure that this program was benefiting the students and also benefiting industry partners and maximizing on the county's funding and administration. So having communication, frequent communication, having California Competes facilitating conferences for them to talk with each other was really important, and building a very robust program for the student. It's not just they take the course and then they have the internship as a supplementary. The course and the internship was fused into one. So not only are they getting the hard skills of interning at the partners, at the industry partners, but they're also learning soft skills from the curriculum itself. The policy reforms are trying to identify barriers for students who have in traditional institutions fail, who get left behind. California Competes talks about how they want to identify those barriers and make sure that policy within these pilot programs are establishing and identifying those issues and trying to fix them. More importantly, they're also trying to leverage the political power from the county and the expertise from the industry partners to make those policy changes and making sure that everyone knows the capacity of which each stakeholder can handle. And that kind of leads on to my cross-sector collaboration. The county in LA is really powerful, and community colleges might not have known the opportunities that the county can offer. I think, for example, they talked about how the county offers CalFresh, and most of their students don't take that program, but they qualify for those programs. And so having that working relationship with the county, kind of identifying aha moments, so that way everyone can let students succeed without having these information silos, which was the biggest description I kept hitting when I was doing this research, is that the county, the community colleges, and the industry partners were information silos. They had all this knowledge, all this credibility, but they didn't know how to use it, and they didn't know how to break down those silos. So it was really important that they did for this program. And then my secret sauce is that it takes a community. Had not these stakeholders were involved and involved early and frequent, it wouldn't have succeeded. You needed all of the actors involved at the table to ensure that everyone was getting what they needed, but also providing resources and allocations for the students. So this is my logic model, and it's quite similar to Blanca's and Z's, but I want to point out that for mine, I wanted to talk about these two mediating factors, cultural sensitivity and Prop 209. Because of Prop 209, I couldn't explicitly target this workforce program for Latino community college students. It has to be open for all due to Prop 209. So I'm losing a lot of cultural sensitivity for this workforce development program for Latino men specifically. But I argue that if workforce development programs coexist in something like the Puentes Project or like Mikasa, which Z will present after me, it could have some real teeth in answering this policy problem. I also wanted to talk about my outcomes and impacts because they're a little bit different from my colleagues. I think for a lot of students, you might have a difficulty choosing a degree. I think now they're being more transparent about how much money you'll make with a degree, but it's still, if you're not looking, you might not know. And so a real mediating factor for my alternative is that degree choice out of community college. What degree you pick will matter about your long-term career success. And I also wanted to talk about another one, which is family and community expectations. What is expected of you is going to be your priority outside of community college and eventually to a bachelor's degree. So having that mention, a lot of students in community colleges might have to work a full-time job, might have a family of their own, or live in multi-generational family where they're needed. So I can't stress this enough that the outcomes and impacts really do matter about how the student is stable after the community college. So this is my qualitative CAM, and I just want to say that my alternative is kind of middle of the road. 3, and 4. Unfortunately for me, I don't have an alternative that has that Latino lens perspective. It's open to all community college students. And even though Blancas and Z's are also open to all community college students, there is that Hispanic lens that they provide and culture that my program does not. I will argue, though, that this pilot, the LA2CCC, the colleges that they're participating in is a predominantly like Latino population. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact demographic statistics of each of the colleges that are involved, but LA has a huge diverse population. So that's kind of why I picked this pilot, is because it, even though doesn't target Latinos explicitly, there is a lot of things that it does target for Latinos, especially being underrepresented in STEM jobs and also being underrepresented in paid internships. So with that being said, my alternative gets a 3.2. It's not, unfortunately, a very high score, but I will argue still that it's addressing the economic issues of a community college student. It's also understanding that for a first generation, low income, English as a second speaking language Latino student, workforce programs will really help them branch out and have visible career pathways had they not done this program. It's really important to give them access and keep giving them access to opportunities had they not had in community colleges. So let me talk about final thoughts. This program is about streamlining partnerships for, overall success. The students' needs were coming first in this pilot, but it also was talking about how all the stakeholders can work in tandem to help provide better access of resources and get students really career ready. By having a student career ready, not only are they minimizing the amount of time and resources they need to pick a career out of community colleges, but they also have a network of people from this program that they can use once they get out of community college. I had a professor once who told me, your network is your net worth. And I think that's really crucial in finding success for Latino students. If they have a safety net of networks, they will be able to have opportunities of help and resources given to them had they not done this program. The biggest pros and cons of this program is that we are paying students. This is a paid program. I think that was the biggest priority, was making sure students were getting paid for their time, especially in the second district where they are very underserved and underrepresented. You need to pay these students for their time that they're doing. They're giving them hard and soft skills that they can transfer over to a 4-year or to a career entry level. The biggest con is that it is not explicitly for Latinos. It does not have that Latino lens that it would solve this policy problem. And to close it off, I want to say that due to the success of LA2CCC, California Competes just announced that they will offer a similar pilot program in the Bay Area, which I will say it's a metropolitan area just like LA, but the demographic is quite different. So I would love to see how that would work in a North Cal Bay Area demographic, because the success of this program might have to do with the demographic. It might have to do with the stakeholders involved. So seeing that being played out in another area will be very interesting to look forward to. And with that, I ask of any questions. Megan.
So I know that you mentioned that it's not expressly targeted at females. Is there a way that you could indirectly target it? like, I guess, is your suggestion to expand this program across California or to expand it specifically in areas where there might be more?
Yeah. So I think in order to capture Latinos more indirectly from this program, it does need to coexist in something like the Puentes Project or Mikasa, because the Puentes Project and Mikasa have an institution recognition of being, Latino forward. It's not explicitly Latino, they're open to everyone, but there's that cultural aspect that they bring into the program itself. And the workforce program is more about tackling economic issues and job readiness issues for students. So I would say that in order for them to indirectly target Latino students, it is twofold, where they need to be in HSI schools, and they also need to be more actively involved with Latino stakeholders. So, Latino company owners, Latino admin, Latino county workers, that's how they can address it indirectly. Colin? I'm not quite sure. I asked Sujin if there was going to be shareable data. It wasn't quite sure that they were. Like, I don't think that was their intention when they developed this pilot program. It was more so about establishing that working relationship. She did mention that this could be something that would be given data on from other resource agencies, but not like explicitly through California Competes. That wasn't their part of this program. Zach?
What's your perspective? Yeah, like, is there a way around it?
Yeah. So that'll be we're going to ask our stakeholders that question, I believe. So that'll be interesting to get their perspective on it. My perspective of this is that I don't think Prop 209 really hinders, like, I think it hinders me in answering this policy problem, but I don't think it hinders the overall success of this pilot program, if this makes sense. To kind of piggyback on Megan's answer, I think there could be a more Latino focus, like having Latino representation involved at the stakeholder tables, having them meet with the students and seeing the demographic of students who are going through this program. That data was not provided to me of like what type of students are going into this program. But I would say that Prop 209 might actually, I think that this program is beneficial for all community college students. So I don't think I would want a program like this to be only to Latino students. I think that if it coexists inside like Puente Project or Mikasa, then that's where it could live and be kind of its subsidiary. But I think right now it's fine as a standalone.
What's the difference between like ethnic facing programs that are getting public funding? Does that go against the line?
No, because they have to open it to everyone. So while it might be like Latino centric, they have to open it to everyone. Blanca mentioned that even though Puentista or the Puentes Project is Latin centric, and 90% of them are Latino, they still have to open it up to that remaining 10% who don't identify as Latinx. So it involved Holly Mitchell, who is the supervisor, and it involved oh oh so that information was not readily available to me, unfortunately. I did go to a webinar with a couple of the community college admins who are involved in the program, and they highlighted some of the industry partners that they're collaborating with. A lot of it is STEM, a lot of it is engineering industry partners in the Los Angeles area, but they wouldn't explicitly state how many students were in the program. And I'm not sure if they wanted to hide that information or if they're going to provide that information at the end, but because the program is still going, I don't think that the data was public.
And we raised that because something called scalability, right? And you can put it in place with a dozen or 2 dozen students and find similar number of employees, but if you want to build it hundreds or thousands, this is what my wife actually does at the Cedar River Workforce Development. Finding internships is one of the most difficult things, especially in the STEM fields. So I think the administratability, that might be a little bit questionable about that form. Put this in place, they're very unstable. You almost have to pay the employer. They're having an employee take time away.
So what was mentioned from Holly Mitchell's staff was that there was available funding at the county level to supplement that administration work that would be needed from the industry partners, and also be funding the paid part of the student's opportunity. But the program, like the curriculum itself, is developed and facilitated by the community college staff, but they work in tandem with the industry partners and the county. So they're not the only person that's involved at the table, but at the end, once the curriculum starts, then they are the forefront, and then the students will go into the internship with the industry partner. Christine? So at the webinar, one of the referenced that the panelists talked about was, it was like an aero engineering like firm in Los Angeles. And they actually hired the students after the program was ended and once they got their associates. But I didn't see any. I did see some rhetoric about, government jobs, the county having those access to government jobs, but it wasn't quite clear what type of government jobs those were. And if so, was those like STEM forward government jobs? There was a lot of rhetoric about STEM jobs, and I think that makes sense because you have a underemployed employment in those STEM jobs for diversity. So I think the county getting involved and connecting with the industry partners and then connecting with the community colleges to fill up those STEM jobs that we're seeing a lot of underrepresentation in. But I didn't see quite much information about like, education jobs or, other career options. Now I will present my colleague Z to do her alternative.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, ladies, for all of that information. My name is Zitlalhi Perez, and my suggested alternative would be a second year intensive, and this would be modeled after Mi Casa program. So just a quick overview of what it would include. It would be campaigning students, providing a home away from home, and providing counseling, as well as helping students with the transfer process out of community college. All right, so my stakeholder is Jose Gonzalez. He is the HSI and Mi Casa director. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us today, but he did provide some great information, especially since he himself is a first-generation Latino who went through the community college system and was able to transfer out to a four-year university. And now he spends his time dedicated to helping other students in the same position as he was. And he does this through Mi Casa. And Mi Casa is the multicultural initiative community for academic success and achievement. So, Mi Casa. Um, it is a Hispanic serving institution that is federally funded through the Department of Education. And their goal is to provide a safe space for students and make sure that they reach their academic goals. They do this by providing success coaches, designated counselors. They receive priority registration, and they get to be a part of a new student community. It's very important to mention the difference between this program and others that exist. So this one is mostly focused on second-year students. So a lot of the programs that are in most community colleges are for those students that are just coming in, so first-year experience. And although they will usually help students that are moved on from the first year, that's not really their priority. So Mi Casa will do that. They will prioritize students who are continuing second year or even more years, because we know that they usually spend almost 6 years in community colleges. So yeah, their focus is really on those vulnerable students, those who haven't adjusted to college, are having more barriers to overcome for education. So yeah, this is really where Mi Casa comes in by providing that community for those students. Okay, so HSI. This is a Hispanic serving institution, which is a subset of what is known as a minority serving institution. And the division provides grant funding to colleges and stuff like that for facilities and other programs that will help with the education of those underserved communities. Excuse me. And those that seek to get this designation of HSI have to meet the eligibility, which is to have 25% or more of Latino or Hispanic students at the end of the award year, immediately preceding the date of the application. So if a community college would want to get this sort of grant, they would have to meet that threshold. Okay, so the first aspect of the program is a campaign. So what do they mean by campaigning a student? What they're doing is that they're going to target the most high-risk students that are about to drop out. So that's students with a 1.0 or lower GPA. Or those that haven't registered for classes yet. So this is an indicator that the student is most likely to drop out. They're in the process of not returning. So the way that they campaign these students is by emailing them, texting them, calling them, just any way to actually reach them and get a hold of the student, being able to talk to them. I know that my stakeholder mentioned that once a student gets to a GPA that's lower than 1.0, they're usually more embarrassed to ask for help or really seek out any other information. It's really, they're at the last point of it. So what they would do is call these students, talk to them, and figure out what are the issues that are getting in the way of their education. So if it's financial issues, whether it's mental health, family issues, the classes are too difficult, the goal is for the success coach to figure out exactly what is going on with the student and being able to refer them out to the different programs. So if it is something that has to do with the finance, perhaps they help them look for scholarships or even, as Natalie mentioned, a paid internship, anything that might help a student stay in school and get the funding that they might need. If it's their grades, the classes are too hard, maybe finding them tutoring. And it's just really, again, about that safe space, about reassuring them that they can continue their education and that any barriers that they're facing can be dealt with. So again, it just aims to prevent dropout among Latino males and get in front of the issue. Which leads me to my next one, which is counseling. And this is a big issue that has come upon for many college students. Mi Casa provides counseling specifically Latinos and other people who may look like them and sound like them, which is good because they are able to relate better to students. But as you can see here, 64% of students are no longer pursuing their college education due to mental health issues. And 95% of college counselors report that mental health concerns are growing on their campus. And this has grown a lot more since the pandemic, which was took a toll on almost everybody, but it also is showing up in higher education. Okay, here are some concerning stats about mental health from 2022. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for college students. Nearly 1 in 5 college students reported struggling with suicidal ideations during college, which is really concerning because there's a lot of students. And this shows that it's kind of life or death also, can be considered that way. Mental health is a big aspect that can be overlooked. But this is for overall students. We want to concentrate specifically on Latinos. I have another graph from the same article where they really break it down, showing where it's more prevalent. So for mixed or multiracial students, it seems to be the highest at 34.9%. And when we focus specifically on Hispanic or Latinos, we see it says 20.7, but it is important to keep in mind that Latinos are less likely to reach out for any sort of help or speak openly about mental health issues or anything regarding that. I know just, growing up in a Hispanic household, it is very common to hear things like, si estás triste, ponte a limpiar. So it's like, if you're feeling sad, like get up, get back to work and start cleaning. And it's just a way of keeping your mind distracted and really honestly avoiding the issue. And it's even worse for males. As previously mentioned, there are a lot of just expectations for males. And in our culture, it's called machismo, which is kind of a bit like toxic masculinity. But it's just a sense of being manly, being told stuff like man up, or, it's very common to hear like men don't cry, to be self-reliant, and have just like a strong sense of masculine pride. So when a student or a person, just in general, a male is seeking to get help, it can be seen as weakness or just looked down upon, which makes it less likely for any or Latinos to reach out for any sort of help. What Mi Casa hopes to be and does is by using the staff who relates to them most. So as Jose mentioned, they do have a lot of Latinos and Latinas who are part of the program. These are just people who understand them better, who know their culture. And another issue that could get in the way as well is language barriers. And by providing the staff that understands them, they'll be able to more comfortable in talking their own language and just be able to share some of the experience that they can relate. Again, just like by having, mental health issues on top of everything like work, school, it can make it easier for somebody to drop out or not continue their school. Which leads to the other aspect of it all, which is meeting the cultural needs. Being a first-generation student in an institute of higher education, it can make it easy for somebody to feel like they don't belong, they're not worthy, they're not fitting in, they're not smart enough, and this is known as imposter syndrome. Yeah, so having this program like Mi Casa around other community colleges, especially with those with the high population of Hispanic students, first generation, can really help them with their identity development by embracing their culture and celebrating other holidays and just things that relate directly to Latinos that would sometimes be overlooked by just a regular institution or your school that you're in. This just really personalize it, makes it personal for you. So it's a lot easier to drop out or leave a school if you have no connection to it, if you're not feeling connected to the institution that you're in, it's really easy to just leave it all. And this way they have a community to rely on, but somebody to check in on them, get them more excited about academic activities or any other activities going on in school, just really cultivating the sense of belonging. And it creates that inclusive and supportive environment. Okay, so I think one of the most important things is the help that they do for transitioning students into a four-year university. So again, as being a first-generation Latino or just a first-generation student, knowing things as simple as, enrolling to classes or knowing which ones to take or just the process of moving on to a different university is very difficult. Sometimes we could take those things for granted, but students, they deserve the additional help that they need in order to continue going to school. And seeing that a lot of Latino students have such a low transfer rate, it could mean more than just regular barriers, but they also may not know. So one of the things they do is credit auditing, and that's when they go over all of the courses that a student has taken. So they sit down with them and the success coach, and they will look over the courses that they have taken. They can set up a plan very similar to some of the things that Puente Project does. Just figuring out that schedule, if you feel like it's going to take forever, it might be discouraging, but setting a timeline with the realistic laid out plan, it'll make it easier for them to grasp the idea of what they need to do to move forward. It could also be that they have already finished and they're still taking a lot of courses because they don't know what the next step is. So through credit auditing, they're able to let them know, okay, well, you're actually already done, or you only need one more credit to be able to move on. So yeah, this process will be for them to just really look over their courses, figure out what they need, what they're missing, and how to move forward. So then the next thing would be an application process, or helping them with the application process, whatever that may be. So if they need a personal statement, if they need to write an essay, if they need letters of recommendations, how to get a hold of their transcripts, all of these little tedious things that you need to know in order to transfer to a four-year university. And that could be discouraging enough to not do it at all. Like if you don't know where to get these things, or if you don't want to write an essay, or it would stop me. I wouldn't want to go, but it's those little things that just helping students get them out of the way to make the process a lot easier. Okay. So another big issue when transferring out is also figuring out how they're going to pay for it, or just the thought of how they would afford such a transition. I think it'd be a lot easier. They think that it's a lot easier to just stop and continue working. So if they're able to provide counseling for the finance and just seeing how possible it can be, can help them. So if they let them know about financial aid, any scholarships or grants that could be available for first-generation students, it could really help them when they're figuring out their finances to move on and move forward from a two-year university. Or sorry, from two-year college to four-year university. Okay, so here is my logic model. It's very similar to my class, to my colleagues. Here are the inside the studio. So some of the inputs are, TESA, the second-year intensive, the diverse staff, counselors, success coaches, student community. Some activities would be campaigning the students' mental health counseling, providing that home away from home, celebrating their culture and holidays. And very similar, having those outputs of number of Latinos enrolled, engagement in activities, academic advancements, number of Latinos transferring out, and some of the mediating factors could be the program accessibility. having the staff being diverse enough for students to feel comfortable, which is a very big factor within this program for it to work. Culture sensitivity, and of course, Prop 209. We've talked about that. We can't just not let people in. We need to accept everyone. And I know Jose did mention that they were able to work with other groups on campus that are like Asian student groups, and they collaborate and they make bigger events for them. But yeah, it's just the whole thing of not being able to just let in Latino students, but everyone. Also HSI funding. So if the school would want to start this sort of program, they would need to meet that eligibility to get that sort of funding. And then outside the studio, again, very similar, but just to, develop community, potential for long-term, establish a network, to actually get their associates or certificates, and of course to transfer to a four-year college and receive their bachelor's, which would lead to stronger economy, having more educated Latinos, and narrow that achievement gap. Again, some of the mitigating factors being family and community expectations, employment opportunities, what kind of degree they select again, and financial stability. Okay, qualitative camp. Very similar again. So for cost efficiency, instead of 4, because they would receive that funding through HSI. For equity, 4 as well, because that's the focus of the program. Even just the name, Mi Casa, home. Focus for Latino students, so that's really going after that issue. And then for the last one, I got a 3. I'm not going to try to say it. But yes, it's easy to implement with clear guidelines, but it has to be able to meet those HSI eligibility, which brings my total score to a 3.8. So like right in the middle. Okay, final thoughts. Strengths. This program coexists with other programs, but like I said, its main focus is for second-year students or continuing students, those that are most vulnerable, those that are most likely to drop out. And this is just to intervene as best as possible, as early as possible, before the students are no longer part of or want to continue their education. So yeah, it's just getting ahead of the problem. Some of the challenges that we've already touched upon would be Prop 209. Not all of the schools qualifying for HSI. And then another issue is like, even if they do cater it specifically for Latinos, that doesn't mean it's just going to be males, even though that is the audience that we are trying to reach. It's really hard to narrow it down just for that singular group, but nonetheless, it'll still go towards Latinos overall, even though we do want to focus on Hispanic males. But yeah, for the future, if they build rapport with Latino students and continue to grow this program alongside other existing programs for first years, they'll be able to address those most vulnerable students, like I mentioned before, being able to get to them before it's too late, and just really getting ahead of those problems to try to avoid it as best as possible, giving them the support with people who look and sound like them, somewhere where they feel more comfortable. So yeah, thank you.
Time for a quick question. Thank you, Zita. That was great.
What? Well, starting with that federal funding? Oh, yeah.
Hispanic Serving Institution. Yeah, and it's federally funded. Yes, for the Department of Education. Yeah, and then the schools would have to qualify for it in order to get that funding. Like mentioned, it's like 25%. Like 25% of the Yeah. 25% of the students enrolled or more have to be Latinos or Hispanic for students at the end of the year that they're applying for. So to be able to be considered in each.
The money for this program comes from.
Correct. You have to apply for it. Yes, Colin. TBD. I'll get back to you with that information. I don't think so.
So if it's federal money, like for example, have to be, it's a 25% or more Latino students on campus. If it's federal funds, it doesn't interfere with Prop 209, or is it because it's specifically giving you money for having a certain higher number of Latino students in a campus. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if there's any type of time taken away from faculty members, or staff, that into this program, which is specifically Latino focused, somebody could challenge it, they're using.
Okay. It's like a fairly new program, but I don't think they have that yet. Or I think maybe it could be used. But for right now, it's just mostly students who go through the program and they don't need to have like any GPAs or like to commit to anything. It's just coming and going like a regular like school club. But once you get your information down, they'll get you down. And so they'll make sure to call and text and just spam a student until they get a hold of them. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's me again, and I'm going to be closing the presentation for tonight with the conclusion. And so here is our CAM quantitative analysis with all the alternatives lined up on the table. And so just to reiterate, mentorship has a score of 4.2, workforce has a score of 3.2, and the second year intensive program has a score of 3.8. And with our chosen weighted criterions and percentages, mentorship has the highest rating, so therefore it would be the most effective alternative out of all the other alternatives. And next, we decided to choose a different alternative weight with efficiency being the highest at 60%, equity at 15%, and then administratability at 25%. And so mentorship has a score of 4.25, workforce has a new score of 3.25, second year intensive program has a new score of 3.75. These scores aren't too different from the previous scores, but even with that being said, mentorship has the highest score out of all the other alternatives. And it's really because it's not as fund dependent as the other alternatives, and therefore it's still able to have output regardless of the amount of funding it receives. And we decided to choose to have administratability as the highest percentage. And so with this new alternative weight, especially considering cost efficiency at 25%, equity at 15%, mentorship has a new score at 4.6, workforce at 3.6, and second year intensive program at 3.4. And so once again, mentorship has the highest score. And it's really because it doesn't need that much oversight regarding to like workforce, the second year intensive program. And so if we have chosen this alternative weight, it will be the most effective. So in conclusion, the best weighted alternative is a mentorship program. However, when we think about like what's mostly politically acceptable out of all the alternatives would be workforce program. And it's really because workforce program, it doesn't angle itself at a specific demographic. And I know we did mention a lot about Prop 209. And Prop 209, what it really is that any public entity, it cannot use race, ethnicity, or sex as a criteria when it comes to consideration of hiring and for schools. And so with all that being said, some of our alternatives that we came up with, it may not directly address certain issues, especially for Latino male students. But we're able to indirectly address culture. But however, we cannot directly address gender. And so any consideration for the future or any closing thoughts? I know there's Cal Grant reform, which means that expands the eligibility for students. However, just because there's more students are able to receive funds, does that really solve all the barriers for Latino male students? And we have to consider like the rising cost of living, and so which is already a stressor for students. And I do want to mention about the K through 12 system and COVID students. There are, for instance, I already mentioned how the K through 12 systems do not prepare some of these students for college. However, I feel like COVID really did highlight some of the issues in that system. And so in COVID, what the impact of it has led to staffing and teaching shortages. And when we think about the students that went through the pandemic, how they were at home, Zooming in classrooms, that really impacted it really impacted their ability regarding to like formative and personal development. And there has been reports or stories of how college professors, when they are teaching these students that went through the pandemic, they aren't really not just academically prepared, they're not developmentally prepared as well. And we can only tell what that means as these pandemic students start to roll out. And I know we did mention about anxiety, so then we also need to discuss about how some of these students that went through the pandemic and how they have anxiety just being in person in class. Lastly, I do want to talk about the sustainability of alternatives. And I know that our alternatives may not be the most sustainable. However, we created alternatives to really address the current barriers that Latino male students face. And when I do think about how there are possible new barriers to think about in the future, but we hope that we were able to address any of the issues or barriers mentioned earlier. And that concludes my presentation for tonight.